Right, here's some of this uncivilized. I've talked about the Huns. I mean, we've talked about some of this in chapter 5, so I'm by way of refreshing memory. The Huns came from Central Asia, and they wreaked havoc with Rome. Eventually, the Huns were defeated and settled in the land of Hungary, where that their descendants still are. The Vandals, we get the word vandalism from them. The Vandals came in, and for the first time in 800 years, the city of Rome was sacked. And for instance, St. Augustine was really, really upset. And a lot of persons at that time were blaming Christianity. You know, it's the Christians' fault. St. Augustine, you might call him Augustine, whatever. St. Augustine tried to answer that and saying that he wrote a book called City of God. He tried to say that the problem was not Christianity. And again, I wonder if you believe that Christianity got the Roman Empire to fall, you have to be fair, explain why it was the Christian world that burst out of its seams, invented the automobile, the airplane, the air conditioner, the electric light, the whole bunch, everything else. You have to explain that. So, but a lot of persons will blame Christianity for destroying the Roman Empire. I also want to say this: the Roman Empire was a slave society and had problems with emperor worship. And I learned when I was a kid, the only way to clean out a closet is to take everything that's in it out and start all over. The only way to clean out your car is to take everything that's in it out and start all over. I mean, I'm not talking about just cleaning a little bit of dust and dirt that got on the floor. I mean, I'm talking about a car that's really, really cluttered. Take everything out completely, then clean up, and then put some things back in without putting everything back in. So in the case of the Roman Empire, maybe Western Europe needed to be cleaned out, destroyed, and started all over from scratch. But anyway, the Vandals, we get our word vandalism. The Angles, all right, Angles. From that we get the word England, the land of Angle land. Originally, the people who lived in England were the Britons. The Britons moved to Wales and Brittany when they were driven out. But for 40 years, folk, and this is in the records, the German incursions into England stopped. During these 40 years, tradition says, and you can't prove history, that there was a king there named Arthur. And King Arthur had a body of knights around him, 150 or so knights that ate around a round table, knights at the round table. The strongest of all these knights was Sir Lancelot. And this leads to all kinds of stories that happened between Arthur and his knights, and there was Sir Gawain. Have any of you read anything at all about Arthur, the Knights of Round Table? At least a couple of you have. 3 or 4, I'm sure you have, George, yes. King Arthur, the Knights of Round Table.
Lady Guinevere,
Lady Guinevere, got a sword, yes. And the Sword of the Stone. Arthur got to be king when, as a boy of 15, he pulled a sword out of a stone and nobody else could pull. And his older brother tried to claim that he pulled it out, but when they put the sword back in the stone, nobody else could pull it but Arthur. And therefore Arthur got to be king. And since England had not had a king for a while, Arthur's job was to get the people of Britain together, and they fought off, according to the story, they fought off the invaders for a while. Unfortunately, Arthur did not last forever. The Saxons, or Angles and Saxons, we get the word Anglo-Saxon. The Saxons came along with the Angles. Now, the Goths, that's an interesting group. The Goths went to 2 places, the Iberian Peninsula, and by that I mean Spain and Portugal, and Italy. And the Goth civilization replaced the Romans. The Latin language died. Italian became the language of the people who are living in Italy. Now, Italian is related to Latin, and if any of you study European languages, there's 2 main groups, the Germanic and the Latin. The Germanic language includes English, by the way. English is their Germanic language. The Latin languages include Spanish and Portuguese and French and Italian. Some of you probably...
Romanian.
Thank you, Romanian.
There's the 5 Romance languages.
Spanish, Portuguese, Italian,
French,
and Romanian. Now, I will say this about languages. Modern day TV and modern day radio and modern day media is going to help keep languages from splitting up. Languages are becoming more and more standardized. Now, if you go to England, you'll find that they still spell color, C-O-L-O-U-R. Parlor is spelled P-A-R-L-O-U-R, yes.
And they pronounce things different.
What's that?
Cemetery.
Character.
Cemetery is cemetery.
Okay, there's some
How do you
Character
get
is
differences.
character.
But languages are becoming more and more standardized as time goes on, thanks to the invention of the movie, the radio, and the TV. But they didn't have those in those days, so these people would get separated by mountains or by distance and start speaking a language that other people couldn't understand. But anyway, the Goths, like I say, they replaced the Romans in Italy, largely replaced them. Gothic, and some of the Goths so went to Spain. The Visigoths, all right. They went to Spain. The Ostrogoths went to Italy. What part?
Writing kids.
The Visigoths went to that's right, Italy, I'm sorry. The Ostrogoths went to Italy. Now, the Visigoths in Spain were destined within about 300 years to be overrun by the Moors, or the Muslims, who came from North Africa. Eventually now Spain was destined to drive the Moors out, but it took something like 700 or 800 years, quite a long time. Now the Franks, from them we get the word French.
Dr. Cunningham,
Yes,
is that V-I-S-G-O-T-H? Is that all one word?
V-I-S-I-G-O-T-H-S.
That's what Goth.
Goth, G-O-T-H.
And they went to Spain?
The Visigoths went to Spain, yes.
And the...
And the Ostrogoths went to Italy.
Okay, thank you.
Two groups of Goths. By the way, when you hear of a Gothic cathedral, it has nothing to do with the Goths, so I've been told. It's got that name from somewhere. I don't know all the details. Now the Franks, from them we get the word France. By the way, I did write the name Arthur on the board. There's a good chance some of you will see his name on the final exam. Remember, he became king when he pulled a sword out of the stone that nobody else could pull out. So keep that in mind, folks. I used to stop here and tell the story of Arthur in more detail. The last time I researched him, the authors of the article said he did not exist. This is a tendency we're having more and more to say these ancient heroes didn't exist, including St. George and even including Pythagoras. They're putting, they're putting such a high standard, and to me, I think the war is against religion, whether it be Christianity or Islam, or particularly Christianity. But saying that Abraham didn't exist and David did not exist, by putting such a high standard on the existence of these people that is difficult to prove. But then again, if you apply the same standard, Julius Caesar didn't exist either, and the Roman Empire didn't exist. Caesar Augustus didn't exist, if you apply the same standard. So anyway, now in France, we have a king that came up. He was of the Merovingian dynasty. Now, this man named Ron Brown wrote a book about the Merovingian dynasty, Holy Cross, Holy Grail, in which he says that the Merovingian dynasty was the last attempt to get the Merovingians back on the throne was World War I, that the Merovingian dynasty was destined to rule the world eventually, but there really was a Merovingian dynasty. All right. I feel like I'm getting on a limb here, but the Merovingian dynasty, according to him, was descended from either Jesus and Mary Magdalene or Jesus' brother James. And anyway, how many of you have heard the story, by any chance?
Not that.
Okay, not this one, yeah, but anyway, that's where it gets the name Merovingian, Mary Magdalene. But
I'm so confused. Run that back.
Clovis was a Merovingian. Yes.
I'm so confused about the Mary Magdalene and the...
Well, okay, according to the story, Mary Magdalene was the ancestor of the Merovingian kings. And the Merovingian kings actually believed that they were descended from David and Solomon and Jesus' family, possibly Jesus' brother James, which was Jesus' older brother, or half-brother, depending on your theology.
Is this like scientific?
James married Mary Magdalene.
Is it just like something people say, or is it like
It's
science?
difficult to actually prove, but nevertheless, this family became noble, and their ancestry was documented. Now, the Merovingian kings were destined to rule France for about 300 or 400 years, but now here was the problem, and we're going to run into this throughout the history of royalty. They believed that they should only marry other Merovingians or other royalty. The result was they became inbred to the point where that each king only lived about 20 or so years. A typical Merovingian king would be born at 6 years old. His father would die, so he'd become king. He'd marry at about 14, live about 6 years, and it said that 20 he would die and leave the throne to his 5 or 6 year old son. And they were very weak and sickly and unable, so eventually the mayors of the palace took over. And finally, one mayor of the palace wrote a letter to the Pope and said, I'm actually making a decision. The Merovingians are too weak and sickly to govern. I should be king, and the Pope made him king. That eventually happened. Now, but anyway, Clovis was a Merovingian. He was perhaps the most powerful of the Merovingians. And he is remembered because he converted, was the first one to convert to Catholic Christianity. The first king. You might ask, what about Constantine? Constantine and all the other emperors converted to Arian Christianity instead of Roman Catholic Christianity. Now the big difference is
Who started it?
So Constantine converted to Arius, to Arian Christianity. The big difference between Arian Christianity and Roman Catholic was over the nature of Jesus Christ. Arius believed that Jesus Christ did not exist till he was born of the Virgin Mary. The Roman Catholic Church taught that Jesus was God incarnate and had existed from the foundation of the world and was co-equal and co-eternal with God. Arius had taught that Jesus was not quite fully God. He was only half God and half human. But I want to say this, of all the different theologies that's going around in Christianity today, one that has died is Arianism. Pretty much dead. All other views, and Arianism eventually died out. And I read an author one time who said that if he believed that if he had not been taught the way he was, that he might have become Arian, because Arian had a little bit more logic to it than the standard view that became standard. But the standard view adopted by Catholic and Protestant alike is that Jesus always had existed co-eternal with the Father and co-equal with the Father, that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were co-equal and co-eternal. All right. Anyway, Clovis converted to Roman Catholic Christianity, and this led to Europe becoming Roman Catholic later. If you wonder why did Clovis convert, well, make long story short, his wife was a Christian, his top general in his army was a Christian, his prime minister was a Christian, his kingdom was fast converting to Christianity, and he felt like maybe I better get on board the bandwagon because my whole kingdom is going that way. So, so he converted, and if anything, it made him a more powerful ruler than he had been before. He did well under Christianity, and he was just about the last of the powerful Merovingians. After he died, there was one after him that exerted himself a little bit, but most of the Merovingians were the type of kings I described, weak and sickly and unable to assume their duties as king. All right, Clovis lived around the year 400, which would have made him probably a little bit older than King Arthur. Now, okay, now to give you some example about what it was like to change from Roman law to essentially, when Roman law ceased to be the law of the land, revenge came to replace the state justice system. Now, the Romans would continue to argue that, wait a minute, we believe that if a person commits a crime, it's a crime against the state, it's up to the state to come after a person. Like if a person kills someone else, the state goes after that person ideally. Now, I mean, I know the law is not perfect, but if someone robs somebody, it's up to the state to exact vengeance on that person. But the German system was, no, the person's relatives go out. In other words, if you kill my brother, I'm going to get all my family together and we're going to kill a member of your family. Or we're going to kill the person who killed my brother.
So like a Robin
That's,
Hood.
yeah, revenge. Revenge. Now, they had three other forms of determining guilt. Ordeal. Trial by ordeal. It is where that you have to walk on a hot iron, and if your feet heal fast, you're innocent. If your feet do not heal very fast, then you're guilty. Now, I want to say, with all respect to the Germans, it is known that guilt will make a person heal less fast. Guilt will bring on diseases like cancers or make a person sickly. So there is some merit to this. But I'm not saying that every person who gets cancer is guilty, no more so perhaps than any of the rest of us. But nevertheless, this system of justice replaced the Roman system of justice by law, where that you get a trial, have a trial, and the defendant has his own attorney, and the prosecution has their attorney, and they get before a judge, and each side gets to argue their case, and both sides get to be heard. This was replaced with with a German system of justice, trial by ordeal. The nearest thing we've had to a trial by ordeal is the lie detector. The lie detector is no longer admissible in court owing to the fact that it can be fooled. Okay, how do you fool it? Well, I've heard one thing you can do is if you can stay awake for 50 or so hours, your blood pressure won't change when you ask a question you don't want to know.
Or if you're a doggone good liar.
Now, that's what I was about to say. If you lie all the time, habitually lie day in and day out, and just live your whole life as a lie, you can do it without your blood pressure changing. If you're basically honest and you lie, I mean, okay. When I was at Lockheed one day, we were going to make a joke, that somebody had been promoted, which wasn't so. It was my job to tell this person he'd been promoted. The problem was I couldn't do it without cracking up. Couldn't do it with a straight face.
Not a good liar.
Not a good liar. I blushed, I cracked up, I don't know. But again, I'm afraid that if I were to take a lie detector test, if I lied, I'd be caught. But I mean, anyway, I know a man who went to prison for a couple of years based on, partly on the results of a polygraph, they call them. But anyway, that's the nearest thing we have. Now, eventually, the Wehrgeld, W-E-R, and this is a foreign word. The nearest we have to the word in English is a fine, where that you paid a fine. In other words, if you committed a crime, rather than go through a trial where you'd walk on a bed of hot coals or hot iron, you would you'd pay money to the offended. It was like a fine. The larger the crime, or the more important the offended person was, the higher the Wehrgeld. Now, here's the last one, compurgation. Well, if you would be declared innocent if you could get a number of persons to get together and swear to your innocence. Now, again, this was an improvement over the basic primitive justice of revenge or trial by ordeal. But anyway, there's a story that went around in our courts one time where a man told a judge, well, Your Honor, if you'll turn me loose, I can produce 100 witnesses who didn't see me do it. But the judge said, but no, but we have 2 witnesses who did see you do it, you're guilty. No matter how many witnesses didn't see you do it, you're still considered guilty if you have enough witnesses to say that you did. All right.